Hi guys. So just got back from that stage combat workshop. A little sweaty, but hopefully not too messed up. And now it's time to talk about Iron Man 3. Yes, I did bring this to the theater because I'm awesome. And yes, this was an anniversary gift from Marissa a few years back because she is awesome. So me and Tony had a good time seeing the movie. I made sure to watch a good number of the high-profile reviewers to get a feel for what they thought after I saw it, just so I'm not too redundant in this review. Because I wanted to make sure I had at least something new to say, and I feel like there are a few things that the other reviewers I watched didn't cover, like Walker Brothers, Last Angry Geek, Cinema Snob, Film Brain, Cinemassacre, and Confused Matthew. I listened to all of them. But before I get too deep into it, just gonna let you know, I'll just do a quick little overview of my thoughts without spoilers. Then I'll give you a warning when I'm gonna get to spoilers. So that way, if you haven't seen it, you don't get spoiled with the spoilers of spoilage. So to start things off, it was okay. It was good. I enjoyed it. It wasn't, super great, super fantastic, didn't blow my mind or anything, but it was good. Not as good as The Avengers. I thought The Avengers was really, really good. But it was enjoyable, and I think the core of what made it enjoyable was really the cast. The cast did a great job. Robert Downey Jr. is, as always, perfect for the role of Tony Stark. And he's a lot more on point, I think, with this one than he was with Iron Man 2. With Iron Man 2, I think I'm not sure, but I feel like they allowed for a lot of improvisational dialogue, and it just started to get a little silly. They let him a little too far off the chain, and I felt like this was a lot tighter. The dialogue felt a lot tighter and more purposeful. And I think part of that was probably Shane Black, the new director, who I was really excited when I found out that Shane Black was directing because I loved Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. If you haven't seen Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, see that movie. It's hilarious. It's awesome. That's Robert Downey Jr. at his best. And I know he's really enjoyable in Iron Man. I'd say he's even more enjoyable in Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. It's a great movie. Interesting little mystery comedy with lots of meta humor, which, as you can guess, Downey's really good at. Now, as far as the rest of the cast, Gwyneth Paltrow is still solid. Jon Favreau is still in there as Happy Hogan, just because he's not directing. He doesn't mean he's gone. He's still in there as Happy Hogan, and actually even had a fairly important part to play in the plot. Not so much throughout the movie, but in kicking things off, which was kind of nice to see him still involved in that way, even though he's not behind the camera anymore. Although he was still the executive producer. Don Cheadle as Rhodey, I actually liked quite a bit better in this one than I did in the last one. I felt like Terrence Howard was a better fit at first, but he was. I felt like Don Cheadle and Robert Downey Jr. had much better chemistry in this one than they did before. Much more playful banter and much less antagonistic. In Iron Man 2, it felt a little mean-spirited between the two of them. It felt like he was really tired of Tony. And at this point, it's become almost old hat, old married couple, which is really how it feels like it kind of should be. And I actually wish there had been more interaction between the two. They get to do a lot of fun stuff together towards the end of the movie, and a little bit in the beginning. But I would have actually liked to see more of Rhodey, especially with with his new, as you saw in the previews, new Iron Patriot identity, which I still find kind of funny, because anyone who knows the comics knows that Iron Patriot was actually originally Norman Osborn. It was him trying to replace Iron Man and Captain America at the same time, basically, when Norman Osborn was running S.H.I.E.L.D. But that's kind of off topic. I just want you to picture in your head the idea, anytime you see Iron Patriot, imagine Willem Dafoe in that suit, and I think you'll smile. So I thought that was an interesting way of sort of reappropriating that suit and that identity as an alternative to War Machine. You know, the whole thing being, you know, PR related, because not Power Rangers, public relations. You know, making him more palatable to the War Machine people, which was fun. Ben Kingsley. He's Ben Kingsley. What do you think I'm going to say? You think I'm going to... Oh, Ben Kingsley? That guy sucked. You see him in Gandhi? Eat a sandwich. No. Ben Kingsley was awesome. He was threatening when he had to be threatening. He was entertaining when he had to be entertained. Just chewed up the scenery. Just excellent. The only downside, really the only downside in my mind to Ben Kingsley is that when you have Ben Kingsley in there, he makes all the other villains look bad. He really does. Nobody else can just hold a candle to him in this movie, which is a shame. Because you do want to feel like the other villains are making an impact. Because and I think that was one of the issues was although the villains did get a good amount of screen time, they didn't feel very well developed and well motivated. Specifically, their motivations felt a little cartoonish at times. But I can get into a little bit more about villain motivation, my issues with that during the spoiler section. Special effects still top notch, of course. They did some really fun stuff with the suits. They had a lot of fun with the suits in this one. Because as you saw in the trailers, and trailers obviously, everybody's already been spoiled, you get to see a ton of suits flying all over the place, doing all sorts of things, acting all independently. So that there's a lot of creativity that went into those suits and those designs, and it's actually kind of a shame that we don't get to see more of them. Because you get to see so many different, you see in the trailers, like you see like what looks like the Hulkbuster armor, and you'd love to see more of that, or more of like, them flying apart and doing all sorts of other things. And I would have loved to see a little bit more of that, just a touch more. And even more of Iron Man himself. And I don't mean Tony Stark, I mean Iron Man. It felt like this wasn't really so much an Iron Man movie. Iron Man is no longer really that much of an identity, it feels like, so much as it's Tony Stark. That's who Tony Stark and Iron Man are the same guy. There's no real separation of the two identities anymore. So it just becomes sort of Tony Stark's adventure with his robotic buddies, because the suits can pretty much act independently now with the help of Jarvis, and actually Iron Man himself feels almost outdated, which is a bit of a shame. Now that being said, they do have him do a lot of fun stuff with his toys. They use them in very creative ways. As once again, as you see in the trailers, he has a suit that can, fly onto him piecemeal, and they milk every single permutation of what that could mean. I won't spoil it for you, but they do definitely get creative with it. And that is a lot of fun. But I would have liked to see a little bit more of addressing the Iron Man identity, which seems to no longer really be a separate identity at this point, since it's become so publicized and so ingrained as part of him, and he no longer really seems to have that alternate public face anymore. So that I felt was a bit of a shame, because the dichotomy of superhero and secret identity is always a fun dichotomy to have, fun juxtaposition to have, and it feels like we've sort of, the Iron Man franchise has evolved past it, and I do miss it a little bit, because it is a fun superhero trope. But if I really had to name a weakness to the movie, it was that although the story felt more focused, the story did feel as though they did tie a lot of things together fairly cleanly, compared to the last one got a little messy. didn't feel thematically focused, which is the thing that I haven't heard anyone else really talk about. It didn't feel as though it had a good thematic focus, and it did also feel like it tended towards anticlimax. And I know I said there's suits flying all over the place, and I'm not talking about the action. There's plenty of action, and they do all sorts of creative things, not just with the suits, but also with the villains, in terms of their interactions. Visually, they do a lot of creative things. But emotionally, it didn't feel like there was a good climax to it. There didn't feel like there was any emotional climax. That didn't feel like there was a coherent emotional journey specifically for the character of Tony Stark, who is very obviously the center point of the movie. Oh, and actually, as I'm thinking about his, a good example is the movie does tend to feel like it almost gets distracted a little bit by the different plot points. And during the middle of the movie, the plot itself slows down a bit. It feels almost like it's a mystery story, except there's not really a mystery going on. It's just him trying to figure out what we as the audience already know, and there's not that much driving force to keep the plot moving so much. But what is going on there is Tony Stark ends up bonding with this little boy. And yes, that does sound extremely hokey, but this kid is awesome. He's somebody who I forgot to mention in the cast. But the kid, like 10 years old, whatever, he's matching Tony with the Stark line for line. They are lampshading like every, gruff, anti-hero meets the little kid who tries to win over his heart. And they play it to the hilt on every level. And it's really good. The kid is really good. Tony's really good with the kid. I wish that he served a little bit more purpose in the story. But that again, the cast is great. It's the thematics of the story that are flawed, and as a result, at times the plot doesn't feel like it's moving towards towards a suspension and anxiety, like, oh, where's this going? Because you kind of feel where it's going at times. There is a big reveal. Everybody has heard there's a big reveal. I'm not going to tell you the big reveal until we get into the spoiler territory, but my reaction every time there was a reveal, pretty much, unless it was like, some special effects thing where it just went like, blah! Was pretty much like, instead of like, whoa! Which should be my reaction, it's like, oh! Instead it was, oh, that makes sense. Yeah. I didn't feel like, that taken aback. I felt like, okay, this was properly set up and this fits with it. And you made, I wonder where they'll go with this. And then that was where they were going with it. There's no twist beyond the twist, I guess you could say. Maybe might be asking for a little much, but I felt like, the twist was setting up for something bigger, and it was actually just the twist, which was a little disappointing. But back on the subject of emotional journeys and thematic focus, there's a lot of different character arcs that could be happening with Tony that are kind of happening with Tony that never really end up getting fully explored. One of the big things, and they cue this off right from the movie, is the idea of your past mistakes coming back and, kind of biting you in the tail. And yes, that's kind of a theme, but actually the more you explore it, you realize that, okay, this stuff isn't really his fault. These people were already of the state of mind that regardless of his actions, this is probably the way things would have gone, more or less. If his extremely minor involvement was enough to push this to the next level, then obviously this was going that way anyway. And so the idea of it being his past coming back to bite him doesn't really ring true. Another thing is the idea of him evolving as an adult into an adult relationship now that he's in the relationship with Pepper, learning how to be responsible in that relationship. And they have some good stuff at the beginning where it's like, he feels like, okay, she's the most important thing in his life now. It's really important. This is really important to him. And then that doesn't really get very well explored because they end up spending a lot of the movie apart, and during their time apart, he's really more focused on figuring out what's going on than what's going on with her. And so that doesn't end up really ringing true. And then there's one that I think a lot of people have brought up is his reaction to the events of the Avengers. Where he basically had a near-death experience with flying through the wormhole and the nukes and everything. If you haven't seen the Avengers, I'm sorry, go see the Avengers. Yeah, he almost dies. But thankfully you have Hulk, roar, regeneration, whatever techniques. First aid via Hulk roar. Yeah, it's a thing. Look it up. So him dealing with the stress and the trauma of getting over that, and that seems like it's a major thing. And then that just gets resolved like that. Like this, it's okay. This is something that's important. This is something that's important. Then it goes away, and we don't really get a good resolution for that. They hint at first that he might not. That he relies so much on his suits, and his suits are part of who he is. So you think that maybe, okay, and this actually feels almost like it should be the major theme of the story with the way the plot goes, of him discovering who he is without the suit. And that does kind of get explored, but never really addressed, which is, again, a little strange. He never seems like to really deal with being without his suit. He just, he's frustrated by it, but just like you're frustrated that your car won't start. It's that sort of thing, that sort of frustration. That's not really an identity crisis, and you keep feeling like there should be this identity crisis with all the stuff that's happening to him, and there never really is, and so you feel like you're going through the motions a little bit. You don't feel like there's a journey for the character, for you to follow him through. But you keep feeling like they're supposed to be, because they hint at it so much in the beginning. So that was that's what I mean by a lack of thematic focus and a tendency towards anticlimax. They set up a lot of different concepts that never really gets fully explored. They just kind of skim the surface on that. Now, none of this makes it a bad movie. Don't think it's a bad movie. It's enjoyable. The dialogue is sharp. The actors are great. The special effects are fun. I would say, if you're going into it, don't expect it to have the great heart of the Avengers. Not quite on par with the choreography and the epic scope of that movie. Don't expect, the depth of the Dark Knight. It's a fun romp. At times almost an Iron Man road movie. If you'll believe that. So if that sounds like something that you would enjoy, I definitely recommend go see it. It's obviously, a good part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Definitely not my least favorite. But it's a good movie. I don't know if I'd rank it quite as high as the first. I think the first is still my favorite, just because that had the best focus and the best arc, and the story felt the best in that one. The relationships felt the best. But this one, it felt like they did learn a bit from Iron Man 2. I just wish they had learned to focus their themes a little bit better. Now, let's get into the spoilers. Okay, so I'm going to get into spoilers now. So if you don't want spoilers, pause the video now, go do something else. If you've just started playing this and you're making a snack in the kitchen, I'm going to give you till the count of 5 to run back from the kitchen. Get out of the kitchen! What are you doing in the kitchen? Watch me. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, okay. Spoiler time. Alright, so, the Mandarin. everybody knows that the Mandarin is that's the big deal. Ben Kingsley is not the Mandarin. He is an actor who plays the character of the Mandarin. His actual name is Trevor Slattery, and he's British, and he's delightful, and he's drug-addled, and he's hilarious. But he's not actually the Mandarin. He's not the literal Mandarin. So that is simultaneously funny, unexpected, and a little disappointing. Because, let's face it, we wanted to see Ben Kingsley as the big villain, as the big bad, because he's got such a presence. The guy can play Gandhi, he can play, I've seen him play a Jewish mobster, he can be anything in between, he can do anything he wants, and he's really funny in this role. But the thing is, once you've shown that he's not the lead villain, I'm sorry, but almost anything afterwards is going to feel less. Just because he has that great presence. And the actual villain is the character played by Guy Pearce, who I didn't really mention because he was not really mentioned much in the trailers. His character is Aldrich Killian, who many of you might not even know. I had to look him up afterwards because I was curious about his character. I realized that he's actually a composite of like 4 different characters. Aldrich Killian is probably one of the most minor of the characters that he's combined from. The main thrust of the plot is Extremis, however you want to pronounce it, which was adapted from a major Iron Man story arc, one that led to him having this crazy smart armor and nanotechnology, all sorts of crazy stuff. Here, Extremis is a strictly biological agent. In the comics, it was nanotechnology. Here, it's a biological agent that you can inject someone with, and it allows them to heal from any wound. Pretty much any wound. So long as you don't, completely blow out their chest, head, whatever, they can still heal up. The weird thing is, it's like, they have this weird melty fire thing that creates the healing. I don't know why they involve superheating, but apparently that means they can go to 3,000 degrees Celsius, Kelvin, Celsius, whichever. 3,000 Celsius, because that's hotter. Yes, that is hotter. I have a physics degree, I know that. So you basically have these borderline invincible guys who can melt stuff with their hands, and that's pretty cool. And Killian is the one who heads up the group that develops it, which is AIM. Anyone who's familiar with Iron Man should be familiar with AIM, Advanced Idea Mechanics. Aldrich Killian helped develop Extremis. He created AIM. He also is the big bad who gets super duper powered off Extremis. I do not understand how this guy can survive some of the stuff he goes through. It's ridiculous. He should have died before his last death. And then number 4 is, he's the Mandarin. He's the guy behind everything. And the fact that they merged all these characters into one guy makes it feel a little like you're pushing too much. Many other third installment superhero movies tend to use too many villains. And here they tried to do it by combining them all into one guy. And so you end up with this just, in some ways, cartoonishly evil character, whose motivations just feel kind of weak. He basically just wants, he wants to profit and get power, but he also wants to, I guess, kill the president, because that way he has the vice president in his pocket, but he also wants to kill Tony, and he wants to be, he was a cripple, but now he doesn't want to be a cripple, he wants to be invincible, and he's loving having all the power, and it feels like you have all these things crammed into one guy, and none of them feel fully explored enough to make him a complex enough character to really be the guy who's the true Mandarin. Not to mention the fact that he's pretty much the only villain other than the Mandarin who you see throughout the movie. Everybody else is just his henchmen. You got a bunch of henchmen who all do kind of the same thing with the melty and the healy and the fire. Ugh. He breathes fire for some reason at some point. Nobody understands why, but I know it's a reference to the character Malin that he's based. He's based off of Aldrich Killian, Malin, the inventor, the creator of AIM, who is Baron von Strucker, and the Mandarin. Hoo boy. Yeah, this guy's all over the place. And by eliminating him at the end of the movie, because let's face it, yeah, he dies at the end of the movie. He has to. He's too evil and too powerful to do anything else. You've just eliminated so many possibilities for future Iron Man stories in this franchise, in this universe. And that was one of my problems with the twist. A lot of people had problems with the Mandarin twist. My problems were less, they ruined the Mandarin forever, and more, they missed out on an opportunity to utilize a character. If I had no problem with the false Mandarin idea. I thought that was great. I understand that no other character had the clout that would have worked with. My problem was that there was no unexpected big boss afterwards. You find out he's not the boss. Oh, what do you know? It's this guy who's been obviously evil and has been bossing everybody around throughout the whole rest of the movie, who all the other villains have interacted with. There's no shadowy, secret villain. It's just the guy who you can tell from the moment you see him, okay, this guy's going to turn evil, and then the moment you see him again, okay, this guy is evil and slimy, and he wants to get it with Pepper's Potts, if you know what I mean. So yeah, I felt like his character was just not as... In some ways, they avoided using the real Mandarin because they wanted to avoid, the megalomaniac style villain who's all theatrics and play a more real villain. But in the end, they ended up creating someone who was just as cartoonish, just he wore a suit instead of a big fancy costume. So that was a bit of my problem with him. Not that, oh no, they ruined the Mandarin, but more they missed out on that opportunity. And in losing him, they lost out the opportunity to utilize AIM and the Mandarin, who are both major parts of the Iron Man mythology. AIM is a full-on organization dedicated to using science and technology to take over the world. And they can't use that anymore because they destroyed the head of AIM. And as far as we saw, AIM was pretty much just two people in this movie. He describes it as a brain trust, as a scientific think tank, but as far as we can tell, it only has the two scientists, him and the woman who invented Extremis, and a bunch of foot soldiers. And they only work on the one project. So AIM feels really superfluous as an entity in this movie. And it feels wasted. And same thing with his identity as the Mandarin. The Mandarin in the comics is... and no, I haven't read the Iron Man comics. I've read up on them. I watched the cartoon as a kid, which I did enjoy. But I didn't read the comics, so I'm not a huge comic buff. But I've made sure to be informed. But one of the big themes with the Mandarin is science versus sorcery, which is a great theme for a character like Iron Man. And you can't really do that with any of the rest of his rogue gallery. It isn't really, prominent enough to work in that theme. So I feel like they cut off the opportunity to utilize that theme. So those are two major forces with major themes that they kind of cut themselves off the knees with. And that was where I found disappointing with regards to their choice of merging so many entities into this one story. Because then none of them really get developed well enough, which is really a shame, because you got some really interesting and potentially heavy stuff there. And note, I do say science and sorcery, but the idea with the Mandarin is that his 10 rings of power are actually alien technology, which is just so far beyond, human understanding, they might as well be sorcery. And I'm surprised they didn't choose to utilize that, just because the Marvel Universe has been building up all this stuff with Asgardian technology and the Tesseract, which is, otherwise known as the Cosmic Cube in the comics. And even the arc reactor itself, which is apparently based off the Tesseract. You've introduced all these elements of alien technology. So to just kind of leave it out entirely feels like you took a step back. You took a step away from where you were going to something that I guess you're trying to get back into something that's more hard science, even though the idea of any human walking around being 3,000 degrees Celsius and wearing clothes is, I think, actually sillier. I don't know. Yes, I hate... Wow. I just realized this might be the first movie ever where things would have made more logical sense if all the hot people were naked. Thank you, Iron Man 3. Thank you for that. This is going on. My mind's gone a little off the rails here. But yeah, it feels like missed opportunity. And it felt like we skimmed the surface of these ideas and these concepts and these themes, and we'll never get a chance to probe deeper because we skim past them. And I feel like that is a failing on the part of the movie. And I'm disappointed by that, because it felt like there was so much there, so many good ideas. There were a lot of good ideas. The actual plan of the villain was actually kind of brilliant. The terrorist attacks being not actual terrorist attacks, but accidents that they blame on terrorism to foster a war that they can then profit off of. That is diabolically brilliant. That is a great idea. The problem is that beyond that, you don't... is that they utilize these other forces that don't get fully explored. The idea of the think tank never gets properly explored. You have a think tank. If you have a think tank, you should have all these other experiments, not just the one that creates the one set of super soldiers. You should be having, cyborgs and, flying saucers, whatever. All sorts of crazy stuff. The alien technology could have been worked in here. There was but they stuck with the hot people. And that felt like a missed opportunity. So if you're not going to utilize it, don't introduce that idea. Same thing with Tony's story arcs. His post-traumatic stress disorder, which is basically what he's going through the whole first half of the movie, dealing with basically dying. And then it's off like that. Kid says, why don't you build something? He's like, you know what, I'm going to build something. So he goes and builds stuff, which is what he was doing for the entirety of the thing leading up to the movie. He was working off of, not being able to sleep by working and creating things, and he built all the suits. He's on suit 42 by the time of this movie. That's crazy. But somehow the actions that he was using to distract himself from his problem early in the movie it fixes the problem later in the movie? I don't get it. Although it did lead to Hoodie Man. I love Hoodie Man. That was awesome. Just go down to the hardware store. Pick up a bunch of weapons. Great. So that was awesome. So I think I've kind of rounded out now my issues with the film, my thoughts on the film. There was a lot of fun stuff in here, a lot of good ideas, but a lot of missed opportunities. And I hope that they I hope that they learn from that for other Marvel movies, where they don't try to introduce 3 or 4 different themes at once and not follow through. I would rather them just use 1 or 2 themes and really explore them well. And that's what I would have rather seen out of Iron Man 3. So long as you're not thinking about that, though, so long as you're not thinking about what could be and you just focus on what you're watching is pretty fun. There's a lot of good stuff in there. So yeah, those were my thoughts on Iron Man 3. Tony, I'm sorry I may have been a little rough on you, man, but the movie was rougher on you, especially on his suit. That thing's butt monkey of the of the Iron Man suits. Oh, and before I forget, Marissa also did a little review of Iron Man 3 on her blog. So the link is right here. I'm adding it here because I'm doing editing, I guess. I won't be editing any of this because, yeah, the Jake Says Hi won't be edited, though they probably should be. It's just going to be me unscripted talking about things. So that's what these things are going to be like. And so I'll make sure to talk to you guys later. Hope you enjoyed my little analysis rant review thing on Iron Man 3. And if you guys have anything that you would like me to talk about, or any suggestions for, as always, future Ask DBs, specifically Mother's Day. I forgot to say that yesterday. I want to do a Mother's Day Ask DB if I can, when I get back from visiting my mom, which I'm doing this weekend. So, yeah, pretty much after this, I'm more or less going to bed, and then I'll wake up, and then I'll upload this, and then I'm going to overtime at work, and then I go into a meeting, and then I'm going home to see my mom for Mother's Day, because Happy Mother's Day! Yes, there we go. And until then, I will catch you guys later, and may the power protect you.